wonderful good morning. Breaking news special here on SF Live. I'll be joined by Doug Ramshaw in a few short seconds. He's president of Minerals Alamos. Company had exciting news. We're seeing progress towards gold production. They had their first blast these days, and they announced it this morning. So we're going to talk with Doug about that. What does it mean? How close are we to gold production? And all that. He's going to put that into the right light for us. Before we switch over to him, though, please be reminded to follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, and to make sure to hit that like and subscribe button as well. And of course, hit that bell notification. As you know, we do all our interviews live. That way you do have an advantage, especially when it comes to breaking news specials. Make sure to use that to your advantage, of course. Also, Minerals Alamos is actually a presenting company at our Deutsche Goldmesse next week, Monday, Tuesday. We are hosting that virtually. We have to, unfortunately. But we got some great keynote speakers. We got Ross Beatty, Keith Neumeyer, Professor Dr. Polleit, Mark Friedrich, Chris Taylor, CEO of Great Bear Resources. Doug is also on the board of Great Bear Resources. So a lot of connections there. Make sure to sign up. It is free. Link is in this description below. And let me turn that off. Now let me switch over to my guest. Doug, wonderful good morning. Thanks for coming on the program.
Good to see you again, Kai. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a while. It's been 6 months since we've last had you on, and I went through the news, and it hasn't been too much news flow. Like, you're going into production with Santana. It has been, let's call it, quiet. But catch us up on the last 6 months before we talk about the blast news today.
Sure. I mean, I'm a big believer that if you're going to put news out, it shouldn't be fluffy news. So, if there's nothing that's important, and we won't bother putting out news for the sake of putting out news. So we've had key milestones over the last 6 months, and we've documented those in our press releases. And I think moving forward, you're going to see a lot more news now, especially after today's news as we start mining operations at Santana. So, yeah, I mean, the last 6 months, I think when we last spoke, we'd come out with the maiden resource at Cerro de Oro. We've been working towards our surface rights agreements there, which will allow us to put our permits in, and because that should be our second mine with construction starting sometime next year. And alongside that, there's been the construction at Santana, which, a large part of a heap leach operations construction is preparing the pad, and that's moving dirt around. And to be perfectly honest, it's not particularly, eye-catching as you move all the dirt around preparing the pad location. So we saw in January and March, as pad liner was laid, as the carbon plant was installed on the foundations we put in place, there was a little bit more construction news leading up to our first mining production blast today, which kind of marks its demarcation point between construction is basically over and let mining begin.
Yeah, fantastic. Let's exactly let mining begin. It is that start. What does it mean for you in that regard? Like, is it really now production start? Is that really that, as you said, demarcation point? Are you a producer now?
Well, I mean, no. I think we're a producer. We're a producer when the first gold comes, but in reality, that to have first gold, you have to have first material on the pad. That will probably be next week. To have first material on the pad, you've got to blow it up. Yeah. So these are important chapters as we move towards that. But I think it's fair to say, we've turned a corner here, and I'm really happy in that regard. We'll always be a developer. Because we're always looking to build the next mine and the mine after that, but we're going to do that funded out of production, which is pretty exciting.
Let's get to a little more technical for just a second here, and a couple of things that stood out is, like, of course, excellent fragmentation and further optimization is planned after this blast. Put that in context for us. What does that mean?
Yeah, we always felt when we did the test mining here, there was a test heap leach pad, and we had various lifts of both run of mine, coarse crushed material, even in a fine crushed agglomerated product. We feel comfortably from that 50,000 ton test pad that we can operate on basically a coarse crushed product, potentially some run of mine material, but coarse crushed product. The optimization, we had really good fragmentation from this blast, and you hope that you can get most of the fragmentation from the explosives rather than needing to screen and crush additional material. It adds a step. So you'll see from that stockpile that, yes, there's some coarser material there, and that will be screened and go through portable crusher at site. But yeah, we're very happy with that, and we'll continue to optimize blasting pattern and stuff to ensure that we minimize the amount of coarse crush material.
Yeah. Enlighten me though. Like you set up a stockpile. Why isn't it going straight to the pad? Like, what are the next steps now moving forward?
Well, I think we're filling the ponds right now. That material will probably go to the pad in the next day or two. It was part there, and we've already started the next production blast drilling. So this is the first of many of these. It's nice, I think, for our team down there in Mexico that have done an extraordinary job building this gold mine during the pandemic, and for our shareholders. This is a really great moment for us all, and we're going to savor that for 24 hours and realize that this is a multi-year build. But it's an important point for the company and our shareholders for sure.
You hinted at it, but run us through the timeline now. What follows next? When can we expect to see, let's say, first gold or first concentrate shipment from site?
Yeah, I mean, as anyone knows with me, I always say slow and steady wins a race. So I made sure to highlight in that release that we are going to approach startup of operations in a very prudent manner. No startup goes completely smoothly, but I think if you rush to do things, you run the risk of creating unnecessary problems for oneself. So everything about 2021 in reality is a slow, steady ramp up of operations. So that really, as we enter 2022, I think that will be our steady state production. Really just from the first pit. The blast we saw today was from the smaller Nicho Norte pit. We'll open up the much bigger Nicho pit, and those two pits will combine to represent what will be forward guidance on our production we'll give later in the year. So the next steps will be, commissioning the carbon plant, ensuring that all our pumps and ponds and everything else are working fine. And I don't think you want to go hell for leather, put hundreds of thousands of tons on the pad and just turn it on and just think everything is going to go completely smoothly. It can, and we think it should. But instead, so these first blasts will represent material that will be put on one part of the pad. It's a very big pad, and it will be a small pile on one part, which we will run solutions through in June, and use that to effectively have a test of the carbon plant, hopefully around the end of June, and produce our first gold concentrate. Effectively, that's our first production. Right around the end of this quarter. Does it drift a week or so into July? Quite possibly. Does it drift into August or September? Absolutely not. We're talking days or weeks around that end of the quarter. And it will be a very symbolic first gold production. Everything about that is it's the start of a much bigger journey.
No, fantastic. I think that's why this news is so important today, because it does actually set a hard timeline as well, and towards first gold production as well. I think that's what marks that, and that is quite important to point out. I think on Santana, there's not much else we can discuss at this point. Of course, resource estimate I know is coming out later this year for Santana. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're still drilling around Nicho right now. We'll then in time move our drill rigs to the other pipes on the project. They won't bring in resources, but we want to be able to talk narrative about how Santana can be much bigger than just Nicho and Nicho Norte. So we will have that resource study out. It will be a bit of an annual thing, because without the economic study on this, our forward guidance and mine life and everything will really be dictated by us demonstrating that we can take cash flow from the operation and expand the resource, which will allow us to expand the production profile and mine life of the project. So yes, it might seem a little ass backwards, but Santana is a bit of an anomaly in that regard. As I was saying to someone last night, you can talk feasibility studies, you can talk PFSs, and I've seen many feasibility studies which are wholly inaccurate by the time an operation starts. And to quote, the grandfather of heap leach, Chester Miller, who's still producing gold in the tender old age of 93, I think he is now. His view is, build it, mine it. That's better than any study because that's real. It's not numbers on a piece of paper created by a bunch of engineers in Vancouver or Colorado or whatever. And so, with a $10 million, $12 million build like Santana, we'll let the project and let the financials do the talking. And that will be, an ongoing process through the rest of this year and into next.
Exactly. A couple important points. Proof is in the pudding, and it's not a $600 million build that you have to go high risk on to go build and pray for the best, right? Quickly, and on the other projects, you talked about Cerro de Oro. There's some developments there, of course. Anything new on Fortuna? La Fortuna, sorry.
Fortuna, we wanted to keep some financing flexibility there. Like, obviously, we got a relationship with the Cisco, and our biggest shareholder is a Cisco development, royalty holder, Cisco royalties. So we had a royalty agreement on Fortuna that expired would have been set to expire, and we actually extended it for our ability to maintain that potential cash as a source of funding for Fortuna. We're still not sure whether we build Fortuna concurrently with Cerro de Oro, or I think sequentially makes more sense. That would be 3 mines in 4 years. I don't think there's any rush to try to do 3 mines in 2.5 years. Fortuna, there's probably more news coming on that one later in the year. Most of this year's news flow is going to be operational updates from Santana, coupled with construction, development, exploration updates not construction, development and exploration updates from Cerro de Oro, which the more we look at, and there'll be drilling there'll be more network there, but it's going to be a lot bigger, we think, than was indicated by the initial resource. So, that project, all of our projects, we like to think, we don't mind starting out at 50,000 ounces, but we want to see a viable path to how they can grow to 100,000 ounce a year operations. We think we see that at Santana. We think we see that at Cerro de Oro. We think we see that at Fortuna. That's how you build a good production profile without being spread so thinly across lots of small operations. See how they can grow like El Castillo did back in the day at Castle Gold.
Slow and steady wins the race. I think that should be the slogan, the Minerals Alamos slogan, right? Working well so far. Let's keep that up, Doug. Should we book you in for June 30th then for another breaking news special?
Yeah, let's put a pin in that. We'll probably have an update mid-June as to, just to tighten up that guidance. But it all started with the blast that went off yesterday, and now we're very much on track. So really happy to share that with you and your audience and the market at large today.
Fantastic. Doug, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for giving us that update. Thanks for giving us that, let's call it the scoop here, although it's press released and all that. But I appreciate you coming on and giving us also updates on Cerro de Oro and La Fortuna to keep us up to date there as well. Good luck. Let's hope the carbon plant does its job and we see first gold at the end of June. Thanks for coming on, Doug.
Thanks, Ben.
Everybody else, this was SF Live, a breaking news special with Doug Ramshaw of Minerals Alamos. He's president there. And we talked about the first blast. It is really the kickoff of production. Yes, they haven't produced gold yet, but for me, you got to start somewhere. So I call them a producer now. They're definitely developer producer in my category. So make sure to follow up mineralsalamos.com. We are shareholders. We hold options in the company, so keep that in mind. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Twitter. Hit that like and subscribe button. Turn on that bell notification as well. That way you do get notified when we go live with all our updates, and you have a bit of an advantage when we have the CEOs and presidents present, and you can hear it straight from them instead of just reading some commentary. Really appreciate you joining us, and we'll be back at 8 a.m. with